Support WrestleTalk!
Give us a subscribe.
In a year that's seen dozens of WWE stars and backstage staff released in efforts to cut down on costs, SmackDown star Zelina Vega is the latest to find herself without a job. Hey, remember when Vince McMahon was high on her backstage? It was announced by WWE yesterday afternoon that Vega had been released, and while many will be sad to see her go, it seems that this release may have been in the works for some time. According to PW Insider, the release was largely as a result of WWE's recent edict regarding third-party platforms, which allows the company to claim any money earned by its independent contractors using these platforms, which include Twitch and Cameo. Vega herself is a very successful Twitch streamer, and she also recently started an OnlyFans account for her cosplay. She was also one of the more outspoken wrestlers regarding unionization alongside Paige, which she reinforced shortly before her release was announced, tweeting, "I support unionization," which could be seen as a final screw you to Vince and his cronies. On a personal note, I'm very sad we never got to see the true potential of Zelina on the main roster, and WrestleTalk would like to wish her the best of luck going forwards. Following the news of Vega's release, the ever-reliable WrestleVotes tweeted, "There's a bit more behind the scenes to the Zelina Vega release. Frustration from both sides is an understatement. While it can't be directly tied to today's news, Aleister Black recently requested to move back to NXT and was denied. Dissension amongst the parties involved. Black, like Vega, hasn't had the best booking in the world since his main roster call-up, so it's hardly surprising he wants to go back to NXT, where he was one of the roster's top stars for pretty much his entire run. On top of having actually good booking for NXT call-ups, one of the things fans have been calling for is Evolution 2, a sequel to the successful all-women's pay-per-view held in 2018. Those fans may be about to get their wish. Dave Meltzer has reported in the latest Wrestling Observer newsletter that there is going to be a major announcement on Sunday, November 15th, and that it will have something to do with women's wrestling. While he didn't specify who would be announcing it, it seems that something like a second Evolution would be very much slotted into that major announcement category. It's hard to think of anything AEW related that will be classed as major for their women's division, unless they're actually going to have a women's championship feud. Topical AEW humor. But now it's time for a review of last night's episode of SmackDown in about 5 minutes. Thank you for being awesome pledgehammers on Patreon. No one names their kid this anymore, Larry, and WrestleTalk's personal ring announcer, Rodrigo Benitez. The show kicked off with Roman Reigns and Paul Heyman in the ring, where Roman said he makes everyone relevant. Just look at Jey Uso. Yeah, he's kind of got a point. He's got his eyes on Survivor Series, where he's going to beat Randy Orton. But before then, Orton has to defend his WWE Championship against Drew McIntyre. And because the brand split doesn't exist, Drew McIntyre came out on SmackDown. The two cut some decent promos back and forth, with Drew saying the uncomfortable line that Roman abandoned the fans at WrestleMania, so he had to step up. To which Roman retorted that yes, Drew did step up, but Roman's back now. And since then, no one knows who Drew McIntyre is. No one watches Raw because they're all watching SmackDown. They're all watching him. Yeah, he's kind of got a point. Jey Uso then ran out and inserted himself between them, saying that Drew was being disrespectful, and just like he did to Daniel Bryan and Kevin Owens, he needs to put him in his place. And so the main event was set of Jey Uso versus Drew McIntyre. The one night of the year where Raw and SmackDown go head-to-head in direct competition. After that came an Intercontinental Championship match between Sami Zayn and Apollo Crews. It lasted about 2 minutes, and Sami won via countout when he wrapped Apollo's leg into the metal framework of the ring and left him there. Up next was Sasha Banks telling the haters that she can retain her title after her victory over Bayley last week. And speaking of Bayley, even though their feud is definitely finished, out she came. But we never exactly find out why, because Carmella came out from behind and attacked Sasha again, while Bayley evaporated, I guess? And that was that. Well done, everyone. Great segment. There's your SmackDown Women's Championship feud, everyone. Get excited. Why aren't you excited? Look, it's someone doing a super kick. You like those? She even did a face buster. Why aren't you invested in this great story? Dolph Ziggler versus Otis came next, built off Ziggler and Rude making fun of Otis eating backstage, and then Otis won in about a minute. Backstage though, Chad Gable finds Otis and tells him he needs someone to unlock his potential. He needs the Alpha Academy. Otis gets very excited about it and walks off, but then Chad Gable looks all smug and evil as he does. Where is this going? I don't know, but the Alpha Academy sounds good, so I'm on board. After this came the final chapter of Rey Mysterio versus Seth Rollins, about bloody time, with the two fighting in a no-holds-barred match. Rollins was accompanied by Murphy, and Mysterio and Rollins had a fun match with some innovative offense. And the match came to a head when Rollins ripped off the protective pads on the end of a chair leg and began to try and gouge out Rey's other eye. Don't worry, there's a smaller eye just underneath. Dominic dragged Seth out the ring, so Seth superkicked him, but that's when Murphy unveiled his grand master plan. He did a knee to Rollins. As he got out of the ring, Rollins went to chase and just so happened to fall into a 619 position on the ropes, so Rey obliged and hit the 619 and frog splash for the win. Afterwards, Rey and Dominic both shake Murphy's hand, giving their approval for Murphy and Aaliyah to be together. So, let's talk about Murphy's plan. So, Murphy made sure last week that Rollins qualified for his Survivor Series match against Otis so that Rollins would think he was on his side again. And then this was all to make sure that at the right moment in a no-holds-barred match between Rollins and Mysterio, he could interfere and hit a knee on Rollins, giving Rey the opportunity to win. Convoluted? Sure. Is there any reason why he couldn't do any of those things? It's a no-holds-barred match. You could get involved at literally any time. Was it the surprise of him turning that was the plan? That was the crux of the whole thing? Just beat him up, Murphy. It would have the same effect. And we're getting Rollins versus Murphy next week. And now that Murphy is kind of associated with Mysterio's, that feud is kind of just carrying on then, huh? Awesome. Natalya was backstage next, frustrated that definitely not the GM Adam Pearce won't just put her in the Women's Survivor Series team. Instead, definitely not the GM Pearce made a triple threat with Natalya, Tamina, and Liv Morgan. But swerve! As the match was about to start, it gets changed to a fatal four-way because here comes Chelsea Green. After not being used on the main roster despite being called up from NXT months ago, Green is finally here. And according to WWE.com, she then broke her wrist almost immediately in the match. After the initial scuffle, she was nowhere to be seen, which left Liv Morgan to essentially take the whole match and pin Tamina to qualify. It's so unfortunate for Green that the first time she gets to wrestle, after being vocal on social media about not wrestling in months, she gets injured. And I'm worried for her that now WWE will see her as a lost cause because she got injured. Here's hoping for a speedy recovery for her. The Street Profits and Big E continued their tension backstage, with the Profits saying they're going to be serving L's come Survivor Series, to which Big E responded saying that the Profits at best will only ever be New Day Light, which was a great line. All three of them did their manic laughing like they did last week, but this time Ford and Dawkins scowled as Big E walked off. And finally, it was the main event of Jey Uso versus Drew McIntyre in an unsanctioned match. So unsanctioned was this match that the referee was out there making rope break calls and counting them out when they were outside the ring. So what you mean, WWE, is this was a standard singles match, but you gave it a stipulation for absolutely no reason. Drew starts to line up for the Claymore after a fun back and forth match, but then Roman Reigns comes out and he and Paul Heyman start watching from ringside. I mean, they only did it once this week, I had to get in there somehow. Jey manages to get back in control and says to Reigns that he'll beat him, but Reigns drags him back outside the ring and says, I don't care if you beat him, make him understand. So Jey gets back in the ring and starts pummeling away on McIntyre, much like Roman did to him at Clash of Champions. Drew no-sold it though, getting straight up and hitting a Claymore for the win. Drew and Roman stared off to end the show, with Roman saying once Drew got one of these, shifting the title on his shoulder, then they could talk. So that was the show. Let me know what you thought of it in the comments, and make sure to follow us on Twitter at WrestleTalk_TV, as the polls to rate each show are back over there. YouTube can't do them anymore, but we can do them on Twitter. And according to the votes over there, this was a good episode of SmackDown, with 50% of you voting as such. Around 20% voted excellent, with around 14% voting for poor and terrible respectively. I'm afraid I've got to go against the majority here. I thought this was an okay episode of SmackDown at best. The vast majority of segments on the show were completely throwaway, retreads of the same story, backstage promos that didn't add anything to ongoing stories, or matches that lasted a couple of minutes. The only two feuds given any sort of time were the Mysterio-Rollins match and the Jey-Drew match, the latter of which was really a way to build to Orton versus McIntyre on Raw, which it did a very good job of. I genuinely think Drew might actually have a chance of beating Orton now, which I didn't think he did before. But aside from those two matches, most of the show was fun if you just shut your eyes and don't think too hard. My problem is, I think. And when you start to think, the show starts to not make any sense at all. Following our new rating system on Twitter, I'm gonna have to give this show a poor rating, but a high poor, if that's a thing. Explained is back on Parts Unknown. Check out Laurie Blake's new episode explaining blading in wrestling and the secrets surrounding it by pressing the video on the right. And Seth Rollins may be taking time away from WWE. Press the video below that to find out more. Subscribe here for daily wrestling news videos. I've been Corporate Chopper. Jam that jam.